I kept seeing this word everywhere, epidemic. And honestly, at first it felt a little dramatic. Loneliness? An epidemic? Really? When I hear that word, I think of disease, something that spreads, something that gets worse if nobody pays attention to it. But the more I looked into it, the more I understood why people were using that word. Because this isn't just about men who have no friends. In fact, that's not what surprised me the most. What surprised me was how many lonely men don't look lonely at all. They have jobs, they have families. Some of them have hundreds, maybe thousands of followers online. They show up, they function, they answer messages, they go to work, they sit through meetings, they make jokes, they get through the day. And if you met them, you'd probably think everything was fine. But somewhere in the middle of all that, something starts to go missing. Not all at once, not in a way that anybody notices, just slowly. So slowly that most men don't even realize it's happening. Until one day, they find themselves surrounded by people and still feeling completely alone. And that's what I want to talk about today. I remember reading a comment somewhere. A guy wrote something like, I was at a work party last Friday, probably 30 people in the room, music, drinks, the whole thing. I talked to maybe 15 of them, laughed at the right moments, asked how people were doing, and on the drive home, I realized I hadn't said anything real the entire night. Not one sentence, not to anyone. And what got me wasn't the story itself, it was the replies. Because hundreds of men just said, yeah, same. I thought it was just me. I kept seeing that last one over and over. I thought it was just me. And I think that's actually the most important part of all this. Because when something happens to you in private, when there's no name for it, when nobody around you seems to talk about it, something's wrong with me. At least that's what a lot of men end up thinking. Not, maybe this is happening to other people too. Not, maybe there's a reason so many of us feel this way. Just, something's wrong with me. And that silence, that assumption, is part of what makes this so hard to shake. Because you can't really deal with something you don't have a name for. And most men never get the name. They just get the feeling, that drive home, that quiet apartment, that Sunday evening when tomorrow is Monday and somehow it feels heavier than it should. And no real explanation for why. So I started looking into the actual numbers, and I'll be honest, some of them surprised me more than I expected. In 2023, the US Surgeon General put out an official advisory, Vivek Murthy, the top public health official in America. And it wasn't about smoking. It wasn't about obesity. It wasn't about alcohol. It was about loneliness. I remember reading that and thinking, okay, when the government starts putting out official health advisories about loneliness, something real is going on. Then I came across a researcher named Julianne Holt-Lundstad at Brigham Young University. She spent years looking at this, and what she found was striking. Loneliness increases the risk of early death by around 26%, which she compared to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. I had to read that twice, because we have entire public health campaigns about smoking, warning labels, public campaigns, ads telling you exactly what it does to your body. But loneliness? No warning label, no campaign, no conversation. Just carry it quietly and figure it out yourself. And honestly, that's the part I couldn't stop thinking about, because we've all met men like that. Maybe you've been that guy. You go to work, you answer messages, you make plans, you joke around. And if someone asked how you're doing, you'd probably say, yeah, I'm good, even when you're not. Then I came across the Cigna Loneliness Index. They've been surveying Americans about loneliness for years. More than 60% of American men said they feel lonely, not occasionally, regularly. And most of them told almost nobody, not their friends, not their family, not their doctor. They just kept going. Went to work, came home, grabbed something to eat, did it again the next day. And from the outside, everything looked completely normal. There's a long-running study out of Harvard. They've been following the same people for over 85 years. And the one thing that kept showing up across all that time, the quality of your relationships predicts your health and happiness more than almost anything else. More than money, more than status, more than how hard you worked. The people who stayed connected lived longer, healthier, happier lives. And the ones who didn't. Which brings me to something I want to come back to later in this video, because there's a specific reason why so many men end up on the wrong side of that equation. And it's not what most people assume. But first, I want to show you how we actually got here, because this didn't happen overnight. And once you see it, it's hard to unsee. Here's something I didn't expect to find when I started looking into this. This isn't a new problem, but the scale of it is, and understanding why actually changes how you see it. For most of human history, men didn't have to think about connection. It was built into the structure of their lives. You lived near the same people your whole life. You worked alongside them. You worshipped with them. You built things with them. Connection wasn't something you had to pursue. It just happened, because the conditions for it were always there. Then something shifted, and I kept coming back to one name when I was researching this. A Harvard sociologist named Robert Putnam spent decades studying exactly this. His book is called Bowling Alone, and the title actually tells you everything. In the 1950s and 60s, bowling leagues were everywhere in America. Millions of men showed up every week to the same place with the same people. Not because it was profound, not because they were working on themselves, just because that's what you did. And those leagues, those clubs, those neighborhood organizations, they created something without anyone really trying to create it. Regular contact, familiar faces, a reason to show up. Putnam found that participation in those kinds of groups dropped dramatically between the 1960s and the 1990s. The leagues emptied out, the clubs closed, the neighborhood associations stopped getting new members. And nobody really noticed because it happened so gradually. One less person showing up, then another, then the whole thing just quietly fades. And while that was happening, something else changed too. Handle it yourself. Don't need too much from people. Figure it out alone. That was the message a lot of men absorbed growing up. And I get why that sounds like strength. I genuinely do. But there's a problem with it, because human beings aren't wired to carry everything alone. Nobody is. And when you spend enough years telling yourself you don't need people, you start to believe it. And then one day, you realize you've built a life where there's no room for them anyway. Then something else happened. Something that I think accelerated all of this faster than anyone expected. Around 2012, smartphones became something almost everyone had. Social media went from a place you checked occasionally to something that was always open. And a researcher named Jean Twenge, who has spent years studying generational changes in mental health, noticed something interesting. Loneliness started rising sharply right around that time, especially in young men. Now, I'm not saying phones caused this. It's more complicated than that. But I kept thinking about what screens replaced. The call you didn't make because you texted instead. The bar you didn't go to because you could watch anything from your couch. The conversation that never happened because everyone was looking at something else. None of those things feel like a big deal in the moment, but they add up. And somewhere in there, the already shrinking space for real male connection got a little smaller. So here's where we ended up. The structures that used to create connection disappeared. The culture told men they shouldn't need it anyway, and then technology made it easier than ever to avoid the discomfort of reaching out. 3 things happening at the same time, over decades, and most men just live through it without anyone connecting the dots. Which brings me back to something I mentioned earlier, that specific reason why men carry this so quietly. Because it's not just about not having friends, it goes deeper than that. And I think once you see it, you'll recognize it. Not from a study, from somewhere a lot closer than that. So here's the part I kept coming back to. The part that I think explains more than any statistic. Because you can understand all the structural stuff, the clubs that closed, the leagues that emptied out, the technology that replaced real contact, and still wonder, why don't men just do something about it? Why don't they reach out? Why don't they say something? Why don't they just admit that they're struggling? And I think the answer goes back further than most people realize. Think about what most men learned about showing need. Not from a book, not from a lecture, from real life. The kid who cried at school and got laughed at. The teenager who opened up to someone he trusted and regretted it. The guy who told a friend things weren't going well and watched that friend not know what to do with it. Not because the friend was cruel, just because nobody had taught either of them how to handle that moment. I was surprised to learn there's actually a name for this. Researchers call it emotional stoicism in men. The idea that somewhere along the way, most men learn to manage their inner world completely alone. Not because it feels good, but because showing it started to feel like a risk. A risk of looking weak. A risk of making things awkward. A risk of needing something that nobody around you knows how to give. So over time, the feeling doesn't go away. It just goes quiet. And the man gets very good at looking fine. I came across something that stuck with me. A study from Equimundo. They've been tracking men's attitudes and experiences across different countries. And one of the things they found was that men who most strongly believed they should handle things alone were also the most likely to report feeling lonely. Not the men who had fewer friends, the men who believed they shouldn't need them. That's the trap. You tell yourself you don't need connection, and then the not having it stops feeling like a loss. It just feels like Tuesday. And here's what I think is the most important thing in this entire video. The loneliness most men carry isn't loud. It doesn't feel like a crisis. It doesn't feel like something you need to fix urgently. It just feels like the background noise of a normal life. That vague feeling on a Sunday evening. That moment when something happens and your first instinct is to call someone, and then you realize you're not sure who. Not dramatic, not a breakdown, just there, week after week, year after year. And the reason so many men never deal with it is because it never quite feels bad enough to do something about, until one day it does. Which brings me to the part I actually find most useful. Not the research, not the history, but what seems to actually help. Because I spent a lot of time looking at this too, and what I found wasn't what I expected. So what actually helps? Because I spent a while looking into this, and I want to be honest about what I found. There's no system here. No 5-step plan. The men I kept reading about, the ones who actually managed to build real connection later in life, they didn't follow a program. They just started doing a few small things differently. One thing kept showing up. In comments, in interviews, in stories from men who seemed to figure this out. The ones who stayed connected got specific. Not, we should catch up sometime, but Tuesday, 7 o'clock. That place near your office. You free? That's it. Because here's the strange thing about adult friendships. Most people are waiting. Waiting for someone else to make the first move. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting for it to feel less awkward than it does. Which means both people wait, and nothing happens. The guy who breaks that pattern, even once, usually finds the other person was waiting for exactly that. Something else started making sense too. Most friendships don't start with a deep conversation. They start with repeated contact. Seeing the same faces, being in the same place, sharing the same routine. A gym class at the same time every week. A sports league, a running group. It doesn't really matter what it is. What matters is that it happens again next week, and the week after that. Because that's how familiarity quietly turns into something more. And this next part might be the hardest. A lot of men are waiting for the perfect moment to finally say something real. The right setting, the right mood, the right level of trust. And that moment almost never arrives. So instead, try saying something slightly more honest than you normally would. Honestly, it's been a heavy few weeks. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I'm not sure I have it figured out. Small things, nothing that requires a response, nothing that puts anyone on the spot. just enough to let another person know that you're actually there. And that's usually enough to start something. I'll be honest about something else too. None of this feels natural at first, because most men spent years getting very good at not doing any of this. So when you start, it feels awkward. It feels unnecessary. It feels like too much. And that feeling is actually a good sign. It means you're doing something you haven't done in a while, which is usually exactly where things start to change. Here's the thing that stays with me after spending all this time looking into this. The epidemic isn't really about men who have no friends. It's about something quieter than that. It's about millions of men who learn to carry something without ever being taught how to put it down. Not because they're broken, not because they failed, just because nobody really told them this was coming. That connection doesn't maintain itself. That the people you used to know don't automatically stay. That at some point, you have to choose it, actively, deliberately, even when it feels unnecessary. Not empty rooms, not men sitting alone in dark apartments, just ordinary men, living ordinary lives, carrying something ordinary that nobody ever sees. If any part of this felt familiar, I'd genuinely be curious to hear about it. Not because there's a right answer, but because I think there's something important in just naming it. What does this look like in your life? And the strange thing is, I think this conversation goes even deeper, but it probably starts here.